one of the most remote and mysterious places on Earth lies hidden in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. With a history that ranges from immense wealth to environmental devastation, this tiny island nation is as fascinating as it is forgotten. The island of Nauru, once the richest country on the planet, now faces significant challenges after its natural resources ran out and its economy collapsed. This is the story of a small Pacific island that once stood tall in global wealth rankings, but has now become one of the least visited and most isolated places on Earth. Throughout this video, we'll reveal 10 surprising facts about Nauru that you probably didn't know. From its lack of a capital city to its dark history of human exploitation, there's much more to this island than meets the eye. One of the last facts will leave you speechless, so stick around until the end. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to World Marvels for more incredible and eye-opening stories from around the globe. 10. No official capital. Nauru is an island nation like no other, and one of the most striking facts about it is that it doesn't have a recognized capital city. While most countries have a clear administrative center, Nauru follows a different path. Yaren, a district on the southern coast, is often considered the de facto capital because it hosts the country's key government institutions, including parliament, embassies, and the only international airport. However, Yaren lacks the status and infrastructure typical of a national capital. It's not a bustling city with skyscrapers or iconic landmarks, but rather an administrative area surrounded by small communities. This lack of a capital reflects the island's unique situation. With only 21 square kilometers of land, Nauru is so small that concentrating its administrative functions into a single city isn't necessary. Everything is close by, making the concept of a capital city somewhat redundant. Despite its modest size, Yaren serves its purpose, allowing the country to function, but it stands in stark contrast to the world's bustling capital cities like Washington, D.C., London, or Tokyo. 9. No standing army. Another aspect that sets Nauru apart from most other countries is its complete lack of a military. That's right, Nauru doesn't have its own army, navy, or air force. Given the island's tiny size and remote location, maintaining an armed force would be impractical and incredibly costly. Instead, Nauru relies on Australia for its defense. This arrangement, which has been in place for decades, allows Nauru to focus on internal governance while knowing that Australia will handle any external military threats. This isn't unusual for small island nations in the Pacific. Several other countries in the region, such as Tuvalu and the Marshall Islands, also depend on larger powers like Australia or the United States for defense. Nauru's local police force is responsible for maintaining order on the island, ensuring law and peace are upheld among the approximately 12,000 residents. The absence of a military reflects Nauru's peaceful nature, as the island has historically avoided conflict with its neighbors. 8. One of the world's least visited countries. Nauru is not just remote. It's also one of the least visited countries on the planet. Despite being surrounded by beautiful tropical landscapes and clear blue waters, the island sees only about 200 visitors each year. One of the reasons for this is the sheer difficulty of getting there. Nauru is served by just one airline, Nauru Airlines, with a very limited number of flights each week. These flights are expensive, and the inconvenience of reaching such an isolated place makes it an unlikely destination for most tourists. Even if you manage to secure a flight, getting a visa to visit Nauru can be a complex and time-consuming process. The island's visa policies are strict, and few countries have embassies to assist travelers. In fact, fewer than 15,000 people have ever visited Nauru, meaning that tourism is practically non-existent. This exclusivity, however, makes Nauru an intriguing destination for adventurers and travelers who want to go where few have ventured before. 7. A health crisis, the obesity epidemic. Nauru faces a significant public health crisis, with one of the highest obesity rates in the world. Around 80% of the island's population is overweight, and nearly 40% suffer from diabetes. The roots of this epidemic can be traced back to both cultural traditions and the island's history. In Nauru's past, being overweight was seen as a symbol of success and wealth. The island's leaders and prominent figures flaunted their size as a sign of prosperity, and this cultural norm influenced the lifestyle of the entire population. However, as Nauru's economy collapsed and its once fertile land was destroyed by phosphate mining, the island became heavily reliant on imported processed foods. These foods are often high in sugar, fat, and calories but lacking in nutrition, contributing to the rise in obesity. The sedentary lifestyle that has developed over time has only worsened the situation. The health implications are severe, with many Nauruans suffering from complications such as heart disease, diabetes-related amputations, and other serious medical issues. Addressing this crisis has proven to be a monumental challenge for the small island nation. 6. The richest country in the world once upon a time. Believe it or not, Nauru was once the richest country in the world on a per capita basis. In the 1970s, the island's vast deposits of phosphate, a valuable resource used in agriculture, generated enormous wealth. Phosphate, which is formed from centuries of seabird droppings, was so abundant that it transformed the island into a major exporter. By 1975, Nauru's per capita income reached an astonishing $76,000, equivalent to over $400,000 today. This was more than 3 times the average income in the United States at the time. The government of Nauru paid for nearly everything. Healthcare, housing, and education were all provided free of charge, and no one paid taxes. Luxury cars like Cadillacs and Land Rovers roamed the island's few roads, and many Nauruans traveled the world, investing in properties and living lavish lifestyles. However, this fairy tale didn't last. The phosphate deposits were rapidly depleted, and the island's economy crumbled, leaving behind environmental devastation and financial ruin. The collapse of Nauru's wealth serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of over-reliance on a single resource. 5. A 30-kilometer road network. Nauru is so small that you could drive around the entire island in just over an hour. The island has only 30 kilometers of paved roads, which form a loop around its perimeter. Traffic is virtually non-existent, with only a few cars on the island and a single gas station. Nauru's road network is remarkably simple, allowing residents and visitors to travel from one end of the island to the other with ease. In addition to its limited roadways, Nauru also has a 4-kilometer-long railway. This railway was built to transport phosphate from the mining areas to the coast for export. While the railway was once an essential part of Nauru's infrastructure, it is now largely unused, a relic of the island's once prosperous phosphate industry. Today, the roads and railway serve as reminders of Nauru's rise and fall, echoing the small nation's brief moment in the global spotlight. 4. Environmental destruction due to phosphate mining. Nauru's wealth came at a heavy cost. The extensive mining of phosphate devastated the island's environment, leaving large parts of Nauru barren and uninhabitable. Over time, the island's fertile land was stripped away, replaced by a desolate landscape of craters and rocky terrain. The environmental destruction was so severe that, in the 1960s, Australia considered relocating the entire population to another island, as Nauru was becoming increasingly difficult to live on. The island's interior is now mostly uninhabitable, with much of the land too damaged to be used for agriculture or other purposes. Efforts to rehabilitate the land have been slow and costly, and the environmental scars left by decades of phosphate mining are still visible today. Nauru's story serves as a stark reminder of how resource extraction can lead to long-term ecological damage if not managed sustainably. 3. A country without a capital. As previously mentioned, Nauru is unique in that it doesn't have a designated capital city. While Yaren serves as the administrative center, the island lacks a single, centralized hub of government and commerce. This unusual setup is largely due to Nauru's small size and population. With only 12,000 residents spread across a small area, there is little need for a traditional capital city. Yaren, which hosts Nauru's key institutions, functions as the island's de facto capital, but it doesn't resemble a typical city. There are no major landmarks or skyscrapers, and the district is more of a community than an urban center. Nauru's lack of a capital reflects its status as one of the world's smallest and most unusual nations. 2. The Nauru Regional Processing Center. In recent years, Nauru has made headlines for hosting a controversial detention center for asylum seekers. Established in 2001 as part of an agreement with Australia, the Nauru Regional Processing Center has been criticized for its harsh conditions and human rights violations. Refugees attempting to reach Australia by boat are sent to Nauru, where they are detained while their claims are processed. Many of these refugees face overcrowding, poor living conditions, and long periods of uncertainty about their futures. The detention center has drawn international condemnation, with human rights organizations like Amnesty International calling for its closure. The issue has also strained relations between Nauru and other countries, as the island struggles to manage the facility and deal with the negative attention it brings. The detention center remains a dark chapter in Nauru's recent history, further complicating the island's efforts to rebuild its economy and reputation. 1. Economic collapse after phosphate depletion. The collapse of Nauru's phosphate industry marked the beginning of a long economic decline for the island. As the phosphate reserves ran out, the country's wealth quickly disappeared. Attempts to diversify the economy failed, and Nauru found itself facing mounting debt and financial instability. Corruption and mismanagement only made matters worse, as the government struggled to find new sources of revenue. In a desperate attempt to generate income, Nauru turned to offshore banking and other questionable financial ventures. But these efforts proved unsuccessful. Today, Nauru is one of the poorest countries in the world, with a fragile economy and few prospects for recovery. The island's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of over-reliance on natural resources and the long-term consequences of environmental degradation. As we've seen, Nauru's story is one of contrasts, from immense wealth to devastating poverty, from pristine beauty to environmental ruin. What surprised you the most about Nauru's history? Have you ever heard of or considered visiting this remote island? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Nauru's fascinating past and uncertain future, be sure to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to World Marvels for more incredible stories from around the world. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next adventure.